All right, let's talk about Game Pass because this conversation needs to be had. I was told by one of my audience members that my videos about Game Pass is not to necessarily comment on the console war, but it's about, basically talking about defending a company whose product, that's basically Game Pass, is going to fail. Ladies and gentlemen, like I've said many times, I have no attachments to any corporation. All I care about is how to stretch my dollar. Now, this is also something quite pertinent because I did some mathematics, and in my past videos, you can go watch them, just maybe my past 3 videos or so, I claimed that from my rough math, and this is not precise numbers, that I thought that if we went with the number of Game Pass subscribers and we kind of did some, shifting of plus or minuses, Game Pass was probably bringing in about $3 billion from Microsoft. When you do give or take and say how much expenses and so on and so forth, Game Pass is probably profitable at the 1 point something to $2 billion a year price point in terms of Microsoft pure profit. I was told by one of my audience members that my math is wrong. And I said, well, show me your math and I'll believe you. So in that vein, one thing about, life is when somebody tells you that, you're wrong, you ought to be willing to learn. Sometimes I take it, to heart, and I'm like, okay, let me go ahead and look at more data to see if my numbers are actually correct, because that math was quite instinctive. Now, technically, this comment was right. They said I was wrong, and I was wrong. I thought overall Game Pass was bringing in about $3 billion. Not until I started looking a little bit closer did I realize that I was not wrong. I was actually seriously wrong. Now, you're probably wondering, what in the world do I have here in this particular video? I'll show you here in a little bit. But before we jump into it, hit me in the subscription box so that we can argue about this even more. So apparently, the details and the data for Game Pass eventually found its way to the limelight just in October of last year. And the numbers were not even 2022 numbers. The numbers were 2021 numbers. Apparently, Microsoft's Game Pass, according to the Brazil's Administrative Council for Economic Defense, this is a so-called, I think this is a ministry in, the country, in the nation of Brazil. They basically were able to, I don't know how they went about their dealings, but figures were gleaned from one of their reports, and it was revealed that Game Pass generated $2.9 billion in 2021 just in consoles, not including Xbox Game Pass for PC. This article was published, here on VG247, and Don Pipiat is the journalist. So this is what he's citing. So based on my rough math of about $3 billion for all of Game Pass, I was off. If we throw in the PC Game Pass subscriptions, this number is actually going to be going up more. So the primary reason that a corporation exists, it seems like Microsoft's Xbox is hitting their goals. I'm not, in my mind anyways, a fan of Microsoft or Sony. I'm not bothered by what any of them will be doing. I just strongly believe that if we're going to be looking at this particular conversation, I think we ought to be doing so from an objective perspective. So if you actually look at, say, the conversations that had been had even before these numbers came out, which I'm shocked that not a lot of people talked about this, or not a lot of people are factoring this into the conversations that we're having now, you'll see that in the past, like here in November, of 2020, when just a year after Game Pass had come out, Phil Spencer, had been tweeting and talking a few things about, I know people say that Game Pass is not necessarily profitable, but it's sustainable. He was using the word sustainable. Maybe at that time, Game Pass was not as profitable. Maybe he knew the future, or he knew of the prospects. Anyways, I wouldn't say he knew the future. He knew of the prospects of what it is that they had. In fact, this article here that was actually written by GameSpot in March of 2022, that's basically this year, pretty much says Game Pass has a lot more than 25 million subscribers. So that number has actually, basically increased. After a low introductory rate, the service costs $10 to $15 a month for Game Pass Ultimate. With 25 million subscribers, Game Pass is no doubt generating a lot of money for Microsoft. But the service has not been without its detractors as well. Detractors. I have to deal with these detractors. Some have questioned whether or not the subscription-based model is actually good for gaming overall. It is. The reason I say it is good is because if you actually go and look through the data, you'll realize that Xbox has basically, let me see if I can find the article here. I have it opened. Has paid pretty much hundreds of millions of dollars to developers. So it's the same article. So it says Spencer said historically Microsoft has historically shied away from sharing any specific data about economics of Xbox Game Pass. So the disclosure of hundreds of millions of dollars being paid out in license fees is notable. Still, it's nebulous and it doesn't answer the question of whether or not Game Pass is turning a profit. Spencer recently said Game Pass is very sustainable already. In his vague statement, Spencer didn't say how the service is sustainable and so on and so forth. Now, here's the question here's what this journalist is citing. They're citing that the payments to developers is 25 billion large. Basically, Xbox has an ecosystem called ID at Xbox. You can sign up for it, by the way. If you're an indie developer, you can go get I think you can get an individual account or something of that nature, and you pay a small fee, and they'll give you access into some of their API stuff and so on and so forth. This is part of my learning stuff in game development. I've been looking into stuff like this, and a lot of developers there. There are also a lot of games that are available as well, and Xbox has been paying an average of about $830,000 per game. If you even go and look even further at the Game Pass platform, you also realize that these numbers pale in comparison to, what Game Pass is actually raking in overall. Many people don't necessarily think about the math. And I got this, accusation from one of my audience members saying that, the price of Game Pass would have to go up exponentially for it to be profitable. Ladies and gentlemen, software sales don't necessarily behave like that. You see, they'll tell you that Horizon Forbidden West sold 8.4 million copies. Let's just use that as an example. But how many of those copies sold for $70? How many of them sold for $60? How many of them sold for $30? How many of them were part of, in my opinion anyways, used copies that, people basically bought and then they returned. And then that number is not necessarily, I don't know if it's counted as a second sale. We don't necessarily know how they pull it off, overall. How many of them were bought using, discounts or whatever it may be? No one is really able to delve into those numbers, but that's how software sales work. If you sell your software on Monday for $70 and sell it on Friday for $10, you're still making profit on the $10 that came in on Friday. This is how these companies stay profitable. So if Game Pass has 100 games on there, it's just one fee that they pay. They're not doing it based on 25 million subscribers. They go to the developer and they say, hey, we'll give you $5 million to get Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy on Game Pass. I don't know if you guys know. There was a report that came out and said that's about how much they paid Square Enix to get Guardians of the Galaxy, something like that. But the game is going to be available to 25 million people who will look and say, yo, Guardians of the Galaxy is on Game Pass, man. I'm going to I'm going to pay $12 and I'm going to quickly pay it. And then if a million people pay $12, do you see how that math works? If 500,000 people pay $12 just that, or $10 just that 1 month, it's already paid for itself for that cost of that one title that they were able to, acquire with just a fee of about $5 million for the high-end games, and even some games as little as $1 million. Some games, the developers have actually given the numbers, and Microsoft has paid them as much as $600,000 in some of the articles that I've been looking at. So Game Pass is Microsoft's way of churning in money. Now, let's go to this Activision thing, because I think after looking at the numbers, I've started to reconsider my position on Microsoft acquiring Activision. I was all for that acquisition. I was like, yeah, let's see what, Sony can put up. Let's see what both companies are going to do. In my opinion, I felt like if both of them were, going head to head, we'd be getting all the best games from all directions, right? That's how you need these big corporations to engage in heavy competition so that the best value can come out of it. And on seeing how much Microsoft is generating, I'm like, yo, if they get Activision's library and they put it on Game Pass, who's to say that games like Elder Scrolls and Avowed and Starfield and Fable 4 and Hellblade are going to get any future releases that are going to be significant? Because now people are complaining that, oh, those games that I just mentioned are only going to be, games that we're yet to see what they're looking like. Oh, yeah. But what if Activision's library makes Game Pass pretty much double in subscriber count? Yikes. Is Microsoft going to want to keep making their, game libraries? Or are they just making these games? What is their true intention? So that's one thing that made me go back and say, okay, so I can see and I can, in a sense, sense the concern that people have. But the truth of the matter is you have to go into these, conversations with just your bank account in mind. These companies are corporations, and their primary goal is to be profitable. They treat their customers as profit-bearing, pinpoints. That's basically what we are to them for the most part. Sometimes they'll give value. That's how they make money. If they give value, they'll make a lot of money. Game Pass in just a few years, basically the amount of time it'll take you to make a AAA title, in just that same time, Game Pass has given so much value that's made them grow. But the thing is, whenever these corporations go make a bunch of money, who's to say that they're going to continue to give value like they were when they needed your business? So I can sense that fear, I can sense that concern from some gamers. But the truth of the matter is, Sony would also do the exact same thing. And you can already see that as much as they are hailed for their single player games, they're trying to delve into the live service market. They're taking some of their IPs that already have name recognition and making live service versions or live service shoot-offs or offshoots of those games, because they're trying to harp onto that market. The live service fiasco is still alive and well. And most players will shout and yell and say, we don't need live service or whatever it is. But I can understand the companies need money, according to them anyways. They're not going to survive without money. So they're going to do their best. So everybody who beat on Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, I hope when Sony starts to release its live service games, you maintain that same energy, because you probably won't. You'll be like, well, they gave us single player games so they can give live service games. Well, Warner Brothers also gave you single player games as well. It's giving you a Wonder Woman game, but gamers usually like playing favorites, and they don't necessarily want to pay attention to keep things as objective as possible. This is why I'm always arguing with everybody. It's the worst business strategy to grow a YouTube channel, by the way. I don't know if anybody knows, but hey, I'm all about pretty much making sure that we're clear and we're precise on how we're analyzing things. Don't care about subscriber count. I care that we're precise. I care that we're accurate, because the overreactionary world of YouTube today can really make things look very weird. And just to pretty much, throw down a few things, Sony's relationships to me right now with a lot of the different companies seem to be waning slightly thin in a sense. Sure, we've heard talk about Konami and the Metal Gear remakes and so on and so forth, but that's just, in my opinion, what I think, is going on, at the moment. I don't necessarily think that that's going to be a real big market shift overall. And why I say that is because the relationship with Capcom and Microsoft seems like it's getting, in a sense, maybe stronger. I don't know exactly what's going on in the background, but with Street Fighter 6 coming to Xbox, that really did, change my perception as to how things were going. I was very surprised, in my opinion anyways, as to, this game coming to the Xbox ecosystem. It's, the last Street Fighter game, was not on the Xbox, and seeing this new one on the Xbox signals to me that, Capcom and Microsoft may be forming some really strong ties. Not only is this game the one marker, you can also look at Monster Hunter Rise, the DLC that came out from Monster Hunter World. That went to Game Pass as well. Well, that went to Game Pass, and that to me was like, yo, this is bizarre, in seeing these relationships pretty much, change and transform. And I've been showing you guys basically Guardians of the Galaxy footage, which in my opinion should have signaled to you that it appears to me that Square Enix also is forming, or has always had a relationship with Microsoft, but is willing to pretty much continue to drive, some of their IPs to Microsoft's, ecosystem, if Microsoft actually wants to, acquire them, or if they want to maybe put them on Game Pass and so on and so forth. So pay attention to these things. Phil Spencer has been able to figure out a way to acquire games for very minimal amounts of money based on the profit margin that Game Pass can actually pull in. It's a very powerful strategy, and I think it's one that everybody needs to pay attention to. No need to dog on Game Pass. It's a good service. It's valuable. It's profitable for the company. It gives us gamers who actually subscribe to it exactly what it is that we want. And it has a potential, if Microsoft actually veers or channels their direction that way, to be, a means of making or using the money and profits to make video games, if they would do that. I think that's the next question we need to ask. So I'll get out of your hair. Let me hear your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks so much for watching. Peace out.